Good evening and welcome back. Tonight, we begin a long, slow descent into the silent, gleaming history of value, the story of gold and currency. We will trace the quiet journey of a single, beautiful metal and the abstract idea of money, following its path from the beds of ancient rivers to the quiet flow of modern finance. I invite you to share where you're listening from. Let the atmosphere of your own quiet room tone settle softly around us. Settle in now. Find warmth and soften your breath. Allow your awareness to drift free from the weight of numbers and transactions. Remember, there is nothing to solve, nothing to resist. All the plans and anxieties about material worth can dissolve into the deep, quiet night. Let my voice be your soft anchor tonight, guiding you into a deep, restful calm. We are drifting back through time towards the first glint of metal found in the sand and the first whispered agreement of value under the deep expanse of the quiet night. Nothing in tonight's story will disturb your peace. Let the gentle greeting settle over you. Now allow yourself a long, slow breath in and out, releasing any lingering tightness. Imagine the air around you is turning soft like mist plus moonlight, settling over a sleeping treasury vault. We are entering an ancient myth-like cadence, where the drama of economics has been filtered and softened into serene visuals. Time moves slowly here, measured only by the steady, unhurried accumulation of intrinsic value. Our journey will follow the faint, winding trails of trade and the slow tides of metallic flow, ensuring no tension interrupts your drift. If these gentle journeys help you rest, you may leave a soft like or subscribe, only if it feels comforting and natural for your night. Chapter 1. Origins. The quiet gleam in the riverbed. We begin our long narrative at the ultimate origin and the simple elemental properties of gold. This is the ancient background, tracing the quiet beginnings of the most coveted metal long before it became currency. Imagine the earliest human wandering along the banks of an ancient river. The earth and rock are rough, dull, and dark. Suddenly, a tiny glint of yellow catches the drifting light, a soft metallic nugget lying in the sand. This was the first encounter with gold, a metal unlike any other. The origin of gold's value is rooted in its pure, undeniable physical properties. Gold is incredibly rare, having been primarily formed in distant, immense stellar events and delivered to Earth billions of years ago. It is chemically inert, meaning it does not rust or tarnish. It remains perpetually bright and soft. This enduring, perpetual gleam was the first serene visual that captivated the human eye. The earliest use of gold was not economic, but spiritual and aesthetic. It was seen as the metal of the sun, reflecting eternal light and immortality. In ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, the earliest gentle footsteps of gold were found in temples and tombs. It was crafted into ornaments, jewelry, and ritual objects, serving as a symbolic change of status and a profound connection to the divine. This use cemented its legacy as a metal of intrinsic, non-utilitarian beauty. Before formal trade, early economic activity was based on barter, the direct exchange of goods like grain, cattle, or shells. Barter was simple but limited, often creating stress because it required a double coincidence of wants. You must have what I want, and I must have what you want. The earliest ancient roots of standardized value lay in staple commodities. In ancient Sumer, for example, the value of goods was often measured against barley or silver, which was far more plentiful than gold but shared its non-tarnishing property. The silver usually weighed out in unformed rings or bars acted as a basic softening filter for the awkwardness of barter. Gold, however, maintained a separate higher status. Its extreme rarity meant it was reserved almost exclusively for kings' gods and immense diplomatic gifts. The continuous patient search for alluvial gold, the quiet panning of riverbeds for those gleaming nuggets, was one of humanity's earliest sustained repetitive efforts. This initial phase of origins established the essential foundation. Gold possessed a unique, durable beauty that secured its value across vast distances and long periods of time, making it the perfect store of value, long before the concept of currency was even whispered. The quiet stone of the earth held this treasure waiting patiently for its destiny. Chapter 2. Formation. The birth of weight and standards. The origin of value in non-utilitarian gold transitioned slowly into the next phase of formation. The establishment of standardized weights and the systematic use of precious metals as a medium of exchange. This was a quiet, unexciting evolution, driven purely by the need for economic efficiency. The critical turning point from simple barter to a formal system of exchange occurred in the great urban centers of Mesopotamia and Egypt, c. 3000 BCE. As trade expanded and society grew more complex, the time wasted in arguing over the exact value of a basket of grain versus a load of wool became economically unsustainable. A neutral, widely accepted medium was needed. While gold remained too rare for daily transactions, silver was chosen as the primary metal for systematic exchange. Silver shared gold's key qualities. It was divisible, durable, and relatively rare, but was significantly more accessible. This adoption of silver as a standard of value was the true formation of early currency. The challenge remained how to trust the exchange. Merchants couldn't rely on the visible size of a silver piece. This led to the development of precise weight standards. Imagine the early Mesopotamian scribes and merchants quietly establishing a system where the smallest unit of weight, the shekel, often a small weight of silver, was tied to the weight of a predictable, abundant agricultural commodity like a grain of barley. This was a profound act of intellectual softening filter applied to chaos. It transformed metal from a mere commodity into a unit of account. A loan was no longer defined as 3 cows, but as 60 shekels of silver, guaranteeing a stable value across time and distance. The gentle footsteps of the merchant could now carry value securely, knowing its worth was based on an agreed-upon, verifiable standard. The temples and palaces, acting as the first true banks, played a crucial role in this formation. They possessed the immense administrative capacity and the moral authority to ensure that the weight standards were maintained. Silver, often stored in the treasury, was weighed out for large transactions, with scales becoming the most important serene visuals of early commerce. Gold, while still too valuable for daily use, followed the same path. It was weighed in larger units, often used for international diplomacy or paying mercenaries. Its extreme durability and resistance to tarnish secured its position as the ultimate long-term store of wealth. The difference in value between gold and silver was also formalized into a ratio, another quiet mathematical anchor for the economy. The legacy of this period was the establishment of metallism, and the idea that money must be based on a physical commodity with intrinsic value. The laborious, unhurried process of weighing metal and ensuring its purity became the bedrock of financial trust for the next 3,000 years. The warm breath of stable commerce depended entirely on the precise calibration of the scale. Chapter 3. Early Journeys. The Lydian Innovation and the Coin. The reliance on weighing standardized silver and gold had secured the early economic formation. We now enter the next major phase of early journeys, the profound, quiet invention of coined money, a turning point that revolutionized commerce and finance. This innovation did not occur in the colossal empires of Egypt or Mesopotamia, but in the smaller, mineral-rich kingdom of Lydia, located in western Anatolia, modern Turkey, around the 7th century BCE. The Lydian legacy was the application of government authority to the ancient problem of weight and purity. Imagine the marketplace before the coin. Then every large transaction required a merchant to carry a small scale and meticulously weigh a piece of unformed silver or electrum, and often to test its purity, a process that created stress and slowed down the slow tides of commerce. The Lydian solution was simple, yet brilliant. They took a small, precisely measured lump of a natural gold-silver alloy, called electrum, the origin of their coinage. They then stamped it with an official symbol, the image of a lion or bull. This official stamp was a softening filter for trust. It served as a public guarantee by the state, the king, that the metal piece contained a precise, verified amount of precious metal, eliminating the need for weighing and testing in every single transaction. This invention of coined money, a small, portable, and uniformly guaranteed piece of metal, was a tremendous practical evolution. It instantly reduced the friction of trade, allowing for transactions to occur quickly and reliably. The gentle footsteps of the merchant could now carry a secured value. The earliest coins were highly valuable, used primarily by the state to pay mercenaries or for large wholesale transactions. The warm breath of its efficiency quickly spread. As the concept flowed eastward toward Persia and westward into the Greek polis, city-states, silver and gold were eventually separated for purity, creating bimetallic standards. The Greek cities, particularly those across the Aegean, rapidly adopted and perfected the technology. They realized that the coin was not just a piece of metal, but a powerful symbolic change, a statement of political and economic independence. Each city began minting its own coins, bearing the image of its patron deity, e.g., the Athenian owl, the Corinthian Pegasus, transforming the coin into the legacy of the city's identity and its credit. The adoption of coinage accelerated urbanization and facilitated the expansion of trade during the age of colonization. Merchants could now easily exchange goods, leading to immense capital accumulation and the eventual rise of powerful commercial classes. The legacy of this Lydian innovation was profound. It established the essential function of government in the economy to guarantee a stable, reliable medium of exchange. The quiet stone of the coin, stamped with an image, became the universal language of commerce for the ancient world. Chapter 4. Turning Points. Bimetallism and the Debasement Whisper. The innovation of coinage by the Lydians was the quiet formation of structured currency. But its widespread adoption soon led to the first major turning points, the establishment of bimetallic standards and the subtle economic stress caused by the debasement whisper. As Greek cities and subsequent empires like the Achaemenid Persians embraced coinage, they faced a crucial question: how to relate the value of the two primary metals, gold and silver. Gold was rare and permanent. Silver was more common and essential for daily commerce. The answer was the bimetallic standard, a formal fixed ratio, often around 1 part gold to 13 parts silver, maintained by the state. This ratio was a softening filter, providing immense stability and predictability to long-distance trade. However, the fixed ratio concealed a deep economic tension. The natural supply of gold and silver from mines was not static, and the demand for each metal fluctuated. Whenever the market value of one metal quietly diverged from the official mint ratio, it created an opportunity for profit. This phenomenon became known much later as Gresham's Law, the observation that bad money drives out good money. Imagine a merchant realizing that a gold coin valued officially at 13 silver coins was actually worth 14 silver coins in a foreign market. The merchant would quietly melt down the official silver coins, exchange the silver for undervalued gold, and transport the gold, effectively causing the good undervalued metal to vanish from circulation, leaving only the bad overvalued metal behind. This was a continuous, subtle evolution of market behavior that constantly challenged state control. The most enduring turning point, however, was the practice of debasement. This was a silent, insidious shift, initiated by the state itself, often during periods of immense financial stress, such as funding large-scale public works or distant military expeditions. Imagine the emperor needing more coins, but reluctant to raise taxes overtly. He would quietly recall the existing coins, melt them down, and mint a greater number of new coins by adding a measured amount of base metal like copper or tin to the silver or gold alloy. The external appearance and the official stamp remained the same, but the true intrinsic value of the coin, whispered by the quiet stone, was diminished. This debasement was initially a successful, gentle metaphor for wealth creation, allowing the state to pay its soldiers and suppliers. But its legacy was devastating. The merchant class, quickly recognizing the debased nature of the coins, often testing them through weight or color, would hoard the older, purer coins and demand higher prices for their goods when paid in the newer, less pure currency. This inevitable rise in prices was the birth of inflation, a long, slow economic tide that eroded purchasing power and undermined the very public trust that coinage was designed to guarantee. The warm breath of stable bimetallism often gave way to the distant echoes of financial instability, creating an unhurried, persistent tension that followed every major ancient economy, from the Hellenistic kingdoms to the Roman Empire. The reliance on precious metal coinage contained its own fundamental quiet flaw. Chapter 5. Early Journeys. The Roman mint and imperial flow. The instability inherent in the bimetallic standard and the constant threat of debasement defined the financial turning points of the ancient world. We now enter a long phase of early journeys, characterized by the centralization of coinage under the immense power of the Roman Republic, and later the Roman Empire. The Romans, inheriting the legacy of Greek coinage, perfected the art of systematic, centralized minting. For the Romans, money was a profound statement of state authority known as moneta, from the temple of Juno Moneta, where early Roman minting took place. The standardization of coinage was a primary tool of political and economic formation. Imagine the immense efficiency of the Roman mints, systematically producing millions of standardized coins, to the denarius silver and later the aureus gold. This centralization was the greatest softening filter for trade, ensuring that a coin minted in Rome was accepted and trusted in Britain, Egypt, and Syria. The warm breath of stable Roman currency bound the vast disparate empire together, making commerce predictable and reliable. The Roman early journeys were defined by the immense flow of precious metal, often acquired through conquest and taxation. The influx of gold and silver from conquered territories, such as the massive silver mines in Spain, provided the necessary bullion to fuel the massive circulation of money. This predictable imperial flow sustained the vast military machine, paid the legions, and financed the immense public works projects that characterized the Pax Romana. However, even the immense centralization of Rome could not escape the ancient problem of scarcity. The empire's constant need for money to fund its massive long frontiers always outpaced the natural supply of newly mined gold and silver. This perpetual financial stress led to inevitable turning points of devaluation. The denarius, which began as a virtually pure silver coin, slowly began its long, tragic journey of debasement throughout the imperial period. Later emperors, needing to pay ever-increasing military wages, quietly reduced the silver content of the coin, replacing it with base metal like copper. This insidious process was a gentle metaphor for financial decay. The coin's external appearance might remain the same, but its intrinsic value, the whisper of the quiet stone, faded. Merchants and citizens quickly responded by raising prices, leading to cycles of inflation that plagued the empire. The legacy of the Roman system was twofold. It proved the immense power of a standardized state-backed currency to organize a global economy. But it also demonstrated the inherent fragility of any metallic standard when the political demands of the state inevitably override the economic reality of metal scarcity. The gentle footsteps of Roman expansion were always followed by the slow tides of financial instability. Snas Chapter 6, Turning Points. The Roman currency collapse. The quiet flow of centralized coinage during the Pax Romana eventually led to the most severe financial turning point in ancient economic history, the Roman currency collapse of the 3rd century CE. This was not a sudden catastrophe, but a long, gentle spiral of inflation that dissolved the economic foundation of the vast empire. The origin of this collapse lay in the military demands of the empire. As the frontiers lengthened and the military became professionalized and politicized, the need to pay legions grew immense. When newly mined silver and gold failed to keep pace with these costs, the emperors resorted to the insidious practice of debasement with increasing frequency. Imagine the process as a massive systematic softening filter applied to the coin's integrity. Emperors facing internal stress and external pressure would reduce the silver content of the denarius until the once pure coin was nearly 98% copper, merely coated with a thin silver wash. The warm breath of trust that the state provided was slowly but surely poisoned. This relentless debasement triggered catastrophic hyperinflation. Merchants, recognizing the coin's true lack of intrinsic value, raised prices, continually leading to a financial cycle of tragedy. The government responded by demanding taxes be paid in increasingly rare gold, or often in kind grain or goods, rather than the worthless debased coins. The consequences for the economy were profound. Decline of trade. The unpredictable and fluctuating value of money made long-distance trade, the very lifeblood of the empire, immensely stressful and risky. Merchants preferred regional barter or reliance on stable gold for large transactions. Decentralization. Economic activity retreated from the large monetary cities to decentralized localized estates latifundia, which became self-sufficient and relied on internal barter. The immense centralized structure of the empire began to quietly dissolve into local non-monetary economies. Gold standardization. Paradoxically, this financial chaos cemented the legacy of gold. The aureus gold coin became the only trusted medium for large transactions and wealth storage, reinforcing the ancient belief that gold was the ultimate anchor of value, reliable even when the silver-based currency system failed. The financial turning point eventually prompted Emperor Diocletian, late 3rd century CE, to attempt a massive, calm reinterpretation of the currency system. He tried to halt inflation by issuing the edict on maximum prices, attempting to fix the price of goods and wages. This ambitious, unhurried attempt at control ultimately failed, demonstrating that the immense decentralized economic forces had exceeded the power of centralized decree. The lesson of the Roman collapse was clear. The quiet stone of precious metal could only anchor a currency system as long as the state resisted the temptation to betray the metal's intrinsic value. Chapter 7. Early Journeys. The Birth of Paper Money and Credit. The deep financial stress of the Roman collapse, driven by the debasement of precious metal coinage, confirmed the inherent fragility of metallism. This crisis set the stage for a dramatic, quiet, early journey, the philosophical and practical formation of paper money and credit. This profound shift occurred not in the West, but in the highly centralized economy of imperial China. Imagine the immense commercial demands of the Song dynasty, 10th to 13th centuries CE. Their economy was booming, fueled by advanced agriculture, trade, and industry. The primary currency remained metal copper and iron coins, but the sheer volume of transactions, particularly large-scale wholesale trade, made transporting vast quantities of heavy metal coins immensely difficult and risky. This logistical challenge was the key softening filter for innovation. The origin of paper money was not a government decree, but the need for convenience and trust among private merchants. Merchants began depositing their heavy metal coins with trusted local shops or banks, receiving in return a certificate of deposit, a receipt promising repayment. These receipts, written on paper, were easily transferable and became accepted as a proxy for the actual metal value. This practice, known initially as flying money fakian, because it was so light it could fly away, was a crucial gentle metaphor for abstract value. The paper itself was worthless, but the trust in the issuer's promise gave it power. This was the first time commercial activity was being facilitated by a pure instrument of credit. The turning point occurred when the Song government, recognizing the efficiency and inherent problems of private certificates, centralized the system. They began issuing official jiaozi, the world's first government-backed paper currency, in the 11th century. This was a profound, quiet, administrative evolution. The state's stamp and guarantee replaced the private banker's promise, binding the currency to the authority and stability of the empire. The legacy of this early paper money was complex. It provided immense flexibility and efficiency for the Song economy, fueling further commercial growth. However, it also introduced the ancient problem of inflation in a new form. Unlike metal coins, which were limited by the difficulty of mining paper, money was limited only by the government's discipline. When the government, facing military stress or immense public works, printed too many notes, the value of the paper currency inevitably diminished, creating cycles of financial suffering. This Chinese innovation and the realization that money's function is fundamentally based on trust and abstraction, not just the quiet stone of precious metal, was the most significant early journey away from the metalist tradition, setting the stage for the next great global financial transformations. The warm breath of commerce had moved from the heavy scale to the light scroll. Chapter 8. Turning Points. The medieval golden anchor. The immense logistical success of paper money in Song China proved that trust and abstraction could successfully drive an economy, marking a profound philosophical formation for currency. However, the Western world, facing the political fragmentation of the post-Roman era, underwent a contrasting turning point, a return to the absolute, unshakable stability of gold. Following the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, the vast network of standardized silver coinage dissolved. Trade receded, centralized authority vanished, and the debased Roman currency lost all meaning. This profound financial stress led to a period of decentralized barter and localized economies across Europe. Imagine the atmosphere where there is no political authority to guarantee the value of a coin. The population naturally returns to what possesses intrinsic physical value. This quiet essential need cemented gold as the ultimate reliable anchor of wealth during the long medieval quiet. The most powerful economic legacy of this period was the Byzantine solidus, or numisma, minted in Constantinople. The Byzantine Empire, maintaining the structure and wealth of the Eastern Roman world, ensured that its gold coinage was struck with unwavering purity for over 7 centuries. This coin became the globally recognized softening filter for long-distance trade, trusted from the Mediterranean to the Silk Road. The warm breath of its stability allowed commerce to continue across vast, politically fragmented distances. This enduring purity of the solidus reinforced the ancient belief that gold was immune to political decay, providing immense financial solace in a world of constant change. The turning point was further solidified by the emergence of new centers of wealth and trade in the West, the Italian city-states Venice, Genoa, Florence, during the later Middle Ages. As trade revived, these republics needed a powerful, stable currency for international commerce. They turned to gold, minting the high-purity Florentine florin and the Venetian ducat in the 13th century. These high-quality gold coins were not just metal. They were instruments of commercial trust. Their purity guaranteed by the merchant republics themselves, they became the accepted currency across Europe and the Middle East, replacing the reliance on the distant Byzantine mint. The gentle footsteps of these merchants carried the quiet stone of gold throughout the reviving global economy. This period's legacy proved that money, whether abstract Chinese paper or material Byzantine gold, ultimately requires trust. But in the tumultuous Western world, the only authority reliable enough to back that trust was the immutable, untarnishable gleam of gold itself. The slow tides of global trade flowed once more anchored by the most ancient and serene of metals. Chapter 9. Early Journeys. The Age of Merchant Banking. The stable gold anchor established by the Italian city-states during the medieval quiet provided the necessary confidence for the next profound phase of early journeys, the quiet formation of merchant banking and sophisticated financial instruments. This intellectual evolution marked the decisive break from reliance on physical coinage for large transactions. Imagine the atmosphere in Florence or Venice during the 13th and 14th centuries. Merchants were undertaking vast, long-distance trade journeys, moving wool, spices, and luxury goods across the Mediterranean and Europe. Transporting immense quantities of gold florins or ducats was immensely risky due to bandits' piracy and the logistical stress of physical weight. This problem spurred the financial innovation. The origin of merchant banking was rooted in the ancient practice of credit and trust, but perfected within the competitive, decentralized Italian republics. Merchant families such as the Medici in Florence quietly established networks of agents and correspondents across major trade routes. Their major innovation was the widespread use of the bill of exchange. This was a simple document, a promise to pay a fixed sum in a specific currency at a future date in a different location. A Florentine merchant could deposit gold in Florence and receive a bill of exchange payable to his partner in London or Bruges. This document was the ultimate softening filter for the problem of physical risk. The value flowed, but the dangerous quiet stone of gold remained safely stored in the treasury vault. The bill of exchange had a profound legacy. It enabled the formation of a true international credit system. It also quietly introduced the practice of lending at interest. While usury charging interest was historically forbidden by the Church, the bill of exchange masked the interest charge within the exchange rate required to convert the currency from one city to another, providing a gentle metaphor for compensation for risk and time. The gentle footsteps of these sophisticated transactions transformed the nature of wealth. Wealth was no longer solely defined by the pile of gold coins a person possessed, but by their credit, their trustworthiness, and ability to honor their commitments across vast distances. This shift from physical value to abstract trust was the most important intellectual evolution since the invention of the coin itself. The slow tides of commercial capital accumulation were further channeled by the development of double-entry bookkeeping. This systematic, unhurried method of tracking assets, liabilities, and transactions provided merchants with a clear, predictable view of their financial health, ensuring the stability and growth of their ventures. This practical accounting system provided immense financial solace. The warm breath of these banking innovations ensured that the merchant republics of Italy became the financial anchors of Europe, demonstrating the trust system and abstraction were more powerful tools for economic stability than any physical metal. Chapter 10. Early Journeys. The Age of Discovery and Mercantilism. The quiet formation of sophisticated credit and banking systems in the Italian city-states provided the financial engine for the next immense phase of early journeys, the Age of Discovery, 15th to 17th centuries. This period profoundly redefined global economics and placed gold in a new powerful and central role. Imagine the atmosphere in the ports of Lisbon, Seville, and later London and Amsterdam. The legacy of accounts detailing the vast wealth of the East, carried by the soft wind of travelers like Marco Polo, combined with the stability offered by Italian finance to spur massive oceanic exploration. The goal was to bypass the costly overland trade routes controlled by Middle Eastern intermediaries seeking direct access to Asian spices and, crucially, gold. The initial early journeys of exploration were driven by a quiet, absolute need for bullion, physical gold, and silver. Europe had experienced a perpetual stress from a chronic trade imbalance. They imported luxury goods from Asia, but had few commodities the East desired. This required a constant draining outflow of gold and silver to pay for goods, a pattern that had persisted since Roman times. The turning point was the discovery and subsequent exploitation of immense silver and gold deposits in the Americas. The colossal influx of New World silver, especially from mines in Potosi and gold, radically altered the global flow of precious metals. This was a profound, quiet evolution of the global money supply flooding Europe and subsequently flowing eastward to Asia to pay for spices and Chinese goods. This influx of metals cemented the economic philosophy known as mercantilism. This theory was a simple, pragmatic, calm reinterpretation of national wealth. A nation's prosperity was measured by the amount of gold and silver it possessed. Governments therefore viewed their economies as a zero-sum game, engaging in a continuous low-level political conflict to maximize exports and minimize imports, ensuring the perpetual inflow of bullion. The legacy of mercantilism was the tight centralized control of currency and trade by the state. Governments regulated commerce, protected domestic industries, and crucially maintained a metallic standard and the absolute commitment that all paper currency or trade documents would be backed by physical gold and silver held in state treasuries. The warm breath of this newly abundant metal provided the necessary fuel for Europe's economic expansion and urbanization. However, this massive influx of bullion also led to the price revolution, a long, slow period of persistent inflation across Europe, demonstrating that even immense wealth could not escape the economic law of supply and demand. The slow tides of newly mined metal washed over the continent, creating economic opportunity, but simultaneously eroding the stability of fixed prices. The gentle footsteps of colonial expansion and the establishment of global trade monopolies were entirely funded by the gleam of American gold and silver, locking the emerging world system firmly into the metallic standard. Chapter 11. Early Journeys. The Rise of National Banking. The immense influx of American gold and silver during the Age of Discovery fueled the rise of mercantilism, which defined wealth by bullion reserves. This political philosophy necessitated the next profound phase of early journeys, the quiet formation of national banking and the sovereign debt. The mercantilist state needed control over its money supply and trade, leading to the decline of the decentralized Italian merchant houses and the rise of centralized state-supported institutions. This shift was a significant softening filter on financial risk, transferring the ultimate guarantee of value from the family treasury to the national treasury. The key turning point was the founding of the Bank of England in 1694. This was not merely a private bank. It was created explicitly to manage the government's debt and to provide a stable national currency. Imagine the establishment of the bank as a quiet stone anchoring the nation's finances. It received the legal right to issue banknotes, paper money, backed by the gold and silver reserves of the nation and guaranteed by the credit of the government itself. This was a major evolution of the paper money concept. Chinese paper money was backed by the promise of the reigning dynasty. European banknotes were backed by the credit and collateral of public debt. The Bank of England was effectively lending money to the government by issuing notes, demonstrating that sovereign debt was now the engine of money creation. The legacy of national banking was the profound shift in the definition of money. Money was increasingly viewed as a promise and an instrument of credit, a legal claim on the state's assets, rather than purely a physical commodity. Gold remained the essential trusted anchor, the low embers of intrinsic value. But the actual medium of exchange became light, portable, and centrally managed paper. The warm breath of this financial stability allowed Britain to finance massive global trade expansion and subsequent military expeditions with an efficiency that rivaled the Roman system, but without the persistent need for costly disruptive debasement. The stability of the national banknote became the key tool of imperial growth and the ultimate political metaphor for the nation's financial health. This financial centralization led to the quiet formation of national debt. Governments learned that they did not have to immediately repay all loans. They only had to pay the interest, allowing the principal to be rolled over perpetually. This realization provided immense political and military flexibility, enabling continuous early journeys of global influence, all financed by the trust placed in the nation's future tax revenue. The gentle footsteps of these centralized financial institutions laid the economic groundwork for the Industrial Revolution, providing the large pools of stable capital necessary for massive long-term investments in technology and infrastructure. The financial world was now firmly organized around the central powerful axis of the nation-state. Chapter 12. Turning Points. The Industrial Revolution and the Gold Standard. The quiet formation of national banking and sovereign debt, fueled by mercantilist philosophy, inevitably led to the next massive turning point. The Industrial Revolution, mid-18th to mid-19th centuries. This era dramatically redefined the relationship between money industry and the final anchor of gold. The Industrial Revolution, characterized by rapid technological evolution and massive investment in factories and infrastructure, required an unprecedented increase in the money supply and predictable financial stability. The existing system, still reliant on the physical warm breath of gold and silver, the metallic standard faced two profound stress points. Demand. The booming industries, coal, iron, and textiles, needed massive amounts of credit and paper currency to pay wages and finance expansion. The rate of industrial growth far outpaced the slow tides of new gold and silver mined from the earth. Stability. Following the financial turbulence of the Napoleonic Wars, nations needed an anchor that would guarantee the trust behind the paper banknotes issued by institutions like the Bank of England. The solution was the quiet, systematic formation of the gold standard. This was a major softening filter applied to the financial chaos of the past. Nations led by Great Britain in the early 19th century formally adopted a system where the national currency paper banknotes was fixed in value to a specific, immutable weight of gold. The central bank was legally obliged to redeem any paper currency for the equivalent amount of physical gold upon demand. This commitment was a profound legacy. It placed a voluntary, yet absolute limit on the government's ability to print money, ensuring that the currency's value was anchored to the quiet stone of the physical metal, thereby instilling immense confidence in international investors and merchants. Imagine the gentle footsteps of commerce now moving with confidence. The gold standard provided automatic mechanisms for correcting trade imbalances. If a nation imported too much, it had to pay in gold, which reduced its money supply, lowered its prices, and naturally corrected its trade balance. This mechanical, predictable self-correction provided the ultimate solace for international finance. The turning point was complete. The global economy was no longer dependent on the unpredictable whims of kings or the sporadic discovery of new mines. Instead, it was bound by the rigid, simple mathematical discipline of gold. The distant echoes of Roman debasement were finally silenced by this self-imposed limit. The legacy of the gold standard was a century of immense stable global trade and unprecedented capital flow, establishing London as the financial center of the world. However, this stability came with an inherent economic constraint. A nation's economy could only grow as fast as its gold reserves allowed, creating a hidden constant stress on industrial expansion during times of slow mining output. Chapter 13. Early Journeys. The American Civil War and Currency Innovation. The immense stability afforded by the gold standard provided the global financial framework, but continuous economic stress and the demands of modern warfare forced nations to experiment with new forms of currency, marking a crucial phase of early journeys away from the rigid, metallic anchor. The most profound experiment in this era occurred in the United States during the Civil War, 1861-1865. This massive internal conflict required unprecedented mobilization of resources, far exceeding the slow tides of gold that the U.S. Treasury possessed. The need to finance the war without entirely dismantling the financial system spurred the quiet formation of modern fiat currency. The U.S. government took two major steps that acted as profound softening filters on the traditional metallic standard: fiat currency greenbacks. The government began issuing paper notes called greenbacks, U.S. notes. Crucially, these notes were not redeemable for gold or silver. They were backed only by the credit and promise of the U.S. government, the ultimate definition of fiat currency money by government decree. This was the first time that modern industrialized warfare was largely funded by pure fiat money, resurrecting the ancient Chinese concept that money's power lies in trust and abstraction. National banking system. To create a stable demand for these greenbacks and finance its debt, the government created the national banking system. Banks were required to purchase government bonds in order to issue national banknotes. This system bound the banking structure directly to the sovereign debt of the nation, securing the financial framework during a period of immense stress. While the greenbacks experienced periods of high inflation, a direct result of their non-convertibility to gold, they successfully financed the immense military effort. The legacy of the greenbacks was the quiet, undeniable proof that an industrialized economy could function effectively using currency that was entirely divorced from physical metal. The financial early journey of this period demonstrated a crucial turning point. Gold was still the ultimate anchor for international trade and long-term trust. But paper currency was the necessary and adaptable tool for domestic mobilization and economic growth. The decision to temporarily suspend the gold standard during times of national crisis became a vital, recurring, gentle metaphor for political necessity overriding economic dogma. After the war's conclusion, the U.S. went through a long, methodical process to return to the gold standard resumption of specie payments, reflecting the immense global faith in the quiet stone of metal. However, the precedent of the greenbacks that necessity could create value had been irrevocably set, ensuring that the warm breath of purely abstract money would return again in the future. Chapter 14. Turning Points. The fragmentation of the gold standard. The immense stability and global expansion afforded by the gold standard reigned supreme for over a century, providing the financial structure for the largest global trade system ever known. However, this rigid system contained two inherent flaws that led to its final decisive turning point, a quiet, long process of fragmentation and dissolution. The first profound stress came from structural rigidity. The gold standard required that a nation's money supply be directly proportional to its gold reserves. This meant that during periods of rapid industrial growth or demographic expansion, the economy was constrained by the slow tides of new gold mined from the earth. When economic activity grew faster than the gold supply, the system was forced into a deflationary spiral. Prices and wages had to fall, creating financial tension and unemployment. This fundamental conflict between a rigid metal anchor and the dynamic, expanding industrial economy was the ultimate flaw. The second terminal turning point was triggered by the First World War, 1914-1918. We view this conflict not as a sharp military tragedy, but as an immense, unavoidable softening filter applied to the financial system. Financing the war required mobilization and expenditure far beyond what any nation's gold reserves could support. Nations were forced to abandon the gold standard, printing immense amounts of paper money to purchase supplies and pay troops, leading to rapid inflation and national debt. The legacy of the war was the irreparable damage to the global trust that underpinned the system. While many nations attempted a calm reinterpretation and returned to a version of the gold standard in the 1920s, the fragile peace was shattered by the Great Depression, 1929-1939. This economic natural disaster, viewed as a massive, quiet global suffering, forced nations to choose between maintaining the external discipline of the gold standard, which forced deflation and higher unemployment, and using flexible fiat currency paper money to manage internal economic distress. One by one, the nations quietly abandoned the gold anchor. Great Britain left the standard in 1931, and the United States drastically devalued its gold and later restricted private ownership in 1933. This mass abandonment was a definitive evolution. It showed that national governments facing profound stress and tension would always prioritize domestic economic stability over the artificial external discipline of metal. The legacy of this fragmentation was the end of the long era of metallism that had begun with the Lydian innovation. Money was now officially fiat-backed by the promise and credit of the state. But the belief in gold as the ultimate private stable store of value, the quiet stone, endured, remaining a gentle metaphor for wealth outside the control of governments. The warm breath of economic policy had shifted irrevocably from the vault to the central bank. Chapter 15. Formation. The Bretton Woods System and the Dollar Anchor. The fragmentation of the gold standard, triggered by the immense stress of world wars and global depression, compelled nations to seek a new stable financial formation. This desire for predictable global trade led to the quiet, methodical establishment of the Bretton Woods System in 1944. Imagine representatives from 44 allied nations gathering in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, tasked with building a new framework for global finance amidst the distant echoes of financial chaos. Their goal was a calm reinterpretation of the gold standard, preserving its stability without its rigidity. The resulting system was a profound, softening filter known as the Gold Exchange Standard. This formation was based on a dual anchor. Gold remained the ultimate anchor. The legacy. The US dollar was the only currency directly and immutably convertible to gold at a fixed rate of $35 per ounce. Gold still provided the quiet stone of trust. The US dollar became the global currency. All other major currencies were pegged fixed in value to the US dollar. The dollar was in essence as good as gold for international transactions. This new system provided unprecedented solace and stability for international trade. It allowed nations to maintain domestic monetary flexibility using paper fiat currency to manage employment and growth, while being bound by the external discipline of the dollars linked to gold. The warm breath of global commerce resumed, fueled by predictable exchange rates. Two key institutions were formed during this period: establishing the legacy of international financial cooperation with the International Monetary Fund (IMF) and the World Bank. These institutions were designed to provide stability, manage temporary trade imbalances, and finance global reconstruction, acting as essential softening filters against the chaotic nationalism of the pre-war era. However, this stable formation contained a subtle structural flaw: the Triffin dilemma. The global economy needed ever-increasing amounts of dollars to facilitate expanding international trade as the global reserve currency. But the U.S. could only legally issue those dollars by running a continuous balance of payments deficit. Over time, the amount of dollars held overseas began to vastly exceed the U.S. gold reserves needed to back them. This financial stress meant the U.S. promise to redeem dollars for gold became increasingly unbelievable. The gentle footsteps of the system were heading toward an inevitable turning point as the demands of global liquidity outpaced the fixed supply of the gold anchor. Chapter 16. Turning Points. The end of Bretton Woods and floating currencies. The inherent tension in the Bretton Woods system, where the supply of gold was finite, but the global demand for the reserve dollar was infinite, eventually led to the final definitive turning point in the history of currency. This was the quiet, systematic dissolution of the last remaining anchor to physical metal. As the financial stress predicted by the Triffin dilemma intensified throughout the 1960s, foreign central banks accumulated vast amounts of U.S. dollars. The amount of dollars held overseas far surpassed the available gold reserves in Fort Knox, making the U.S. promise to redeem dollars for gold at $35 per ounce an immense, untenable liability. The warm breath of trust was cooling rapidly. The final turning point came quietly in 1971. Facing immense pressure from European nations demanding gold redemption for their dollars, U.S. President Richard Nixon announced the suspension of the gold convertibility of the dollar. This was a profound symbolic act, a final softening filter on the long legacy of metallism that had begun with the Lydian innovation. The dollar was officially and permanently disconnected from any physical commodity. This event marked the end of the Bretton Woods system and the beginning of the era of floating currencies. This was a massive global financial evolution. Currencies were no longer fixed against gold or the dollar, but were allowed to float, their exchange rates determined freely by supply and demand in the international currency markets. The legacy of this shift was twofold: pure fiat. Money became purely fiat-backed entirely by the full faith and credit of the issuing government. Its value is derived solely from the trust placed in the state's political and economic stability, completing the journey begun by the Chinese paper money. Central bank dominance. The central banks like the U.S. Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank gained immense quiet power. They were now responsible for managing the money supply to maintain low inflation and stable employment without the rigid external discipline of gold. The gentle footsteps of monetary policy replaced the immutable quiet stone of the metal standard. This turning point closed the long, slow 3,000-year chapter, where money was defined by metal. Gold lost its functional role as the anchor of the global monetary system, but its legacy as the ultimate private store of value, a gentle metaphor for wealth outside the control of any single government, remained surviving as the quiet treasure of central bank vaults and individual investors. Chapter 17. Early Journeys. The rise of central banking and monetary policy. The quiet dissolution of the Bretton Woods system. Chapter 16. And the final severance of currency from the gold anchor necessitated a profound set of early journeys into the purely abstract realm of monetary policy. This phase established the modern concept of central banking as the primary driver of economic stability. With fiat currency now the global norm, and the legacy of value management shifted entirely from the immutable quiet stone of gold to the continuous managed actions of the central banks, such as the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and the Bank of Japan. This was a massive evolution of the central bank's role, transforming it from a mere custodian of gold reserves into the active regulator of the national economy. Imagine the atmosphere in the quiet, echoing halls of the central bank and the new symbolic anchor of the economy. The primary goal was to prevent the return of the catastrophic inflation that had plagued the pre-war era, while ensuring sufficient money and credit flowed to support economic growth. The tools developed during this formation were the sophisticated yet unexciting instruments of monetary policy. Interest rates. Central banks learned to adjust key interest rates, the cost of borrowing money, to gently guide the economy. Raising rates acts as a softening filter, cooling down rapid growth and curbing inflation by making money more expensive. Lowering rates acts as a warm breath, encouraging investment and spending. Open market operations. This involves the central bank quietly buying or selling government bonds in the open market. This process subtly increases or decreases the amount of money circulating in the banking system, controlling the flow of liquidity without any dramatic pronouncements. The shift created a continuous subtle stress on policymakers. Unlike the rigid, automatic discipline of gold, which removed human discretion, the fiat system requires constant vigilance and judgment. Policymakers must make continuous, delicate choices, navigating the distant echoes of political pressure and the complex, dynamic reality of the global market. The legacy of this phase is the acceptance that money's value is fundamentally a social construct and a promise backed not by metal, but by the trust in the institution's competence and political independence. The gentle footsteps of monetary policy have replaced the slow tides of gold flowing in and out of the nation, making the modern economy an immense abstract system of managed expectation and credit. Chapter 18. Turning Points. The rise of crypto assets and digital value. The final and most profound turning point in the long history of value, a shift from centralized government-backed fiat money to decentralized digital crypto assets, began quietly in the early 21st century. This era challenges the fundamental legacy of the nation-state's control over currency, which had reigned supreme since the end of Bretton Woods. The origin of this turning point was intellectual, rooted in the desire to solve the ancient recurring economic stress of trust and inflation problems that have plagued money since the time of the Roman debasement. This desire was formalized with the quiet creation of Bitcoin in 2009 by an unknown entity named Satoshi Nakamoto. Bitcoin and subsequent crypto assets represent a radical, calm reinterpretation of the gold anchor. They are designed to possess the key ancient virtues of metal, but in a digital form. Scarcity like gold, the total supply of Bitcoin is mathematically limited and predictable, mimicking the quiet stone of a mine that will eventually run out. Decentralization. The creation and transfer of these assets are managed by a distributed network blockchain, rather than a single central bank or government, eliminating the stress of political control and potential debasement, as seen during the Roman collapse. This technology is a profound evolution because it transfers the ultimate source of trust from political institutions to mathematical code. The system is secured by cryptography and consensus algorithms requiring no human oversight. This softening filter on political risk is highly appealing to those disillusioned by the distant echoes of financial crises and government manipulation. The legacy of this technological shift is twofold. A new asset class, crypto assets, have become a recognized non-traditional store of value, competing with gold as a private borderless hedge against inflation and instability. The technology of trust. The underlying blockchain technology has become a vital formation tool, offering the warm breath of verifiable, transparent record-keeping for everything from supply chains to legal contracts. This turning point does not signal the immediate collapse of fiat currency, but rather the emergence of a parallel, abstract, decentralized financial system. The gentle footsteps of digital value are now flowing alongside the traditional slow tides of sovereign money, ensuring that the long history of money continues its unhurried journey into a new complex future. The philosophical question of what is money has found a new quiet answer in the realm of mathematics and code. Chapter 19. Early Journeys. The global flow of capital and defiance. The quiet turning point to fiat currency and the rise of the central banks. Chapter 16 set the stage for a new phase of early journeys, defined by the immense subtle flows of global capital and the constant decentralized defiance of government control. This era is characterized by the quiet, pervasive influence of money across all borders. The legacy of the Bretton Woods system was the creation of a vast, interconnected network of finance. Capital, now entirely abstract and digital, flows with unprecedented speed and volume, a continuous, rapid evolution from the slow tides of the metallic past. This immense flow of money, facilitated by technological advancements like fiber optics and global data networks, acts as a continuous softening filter on national sovereignty. A financial stress in one major market can instantly produce distant echoes in markets across the globe. The globalization of capital created a structural phenomenon known as euro-dollars and later offshore finance. This was a major formation in banking, the development of a vast, unregulated market for U.S. dollars held outside the regulatory control of the Federal Reserve. This quiet, complex market allowed for the efficient financing of global trade and multinational corporations operating outside the gentle footsteps of national laws. This offshore flow provides immense liquidity, but also creates regulatory blind spots. The early journeys of modern finance are thus marked by a perpetual decentralized quest for freedom from government taxation and control, echoing the ancient merchants' desire to avoid the excessive tolls of early kingdoms. This defiance manifests in two key ways: tax havens, the rise of small jurisdictions that offer minimal or zero taxation and strict secrecy laws. This creation of quiet stone financial sanctuaries for global wealth is a gentle metaphor for the enduring human drive to protect property from sovereign authority. The gold resurgence. Following the final detachment from the dollar in 1971, gold lost its functional role but gained immense symbolic status. Private investors and central banks continued to hold vast quantities of gold, viewing it not as currency but as a pure, permanent legacy, the ultimate financial instrument of last resort, immune to inflation and political tragedy. Its continued holding is a calm reinterpretation of its worth as a fundamental psychological and political anchor, a remnant of the ancient roots of value. The warm breath of this era is the continuous innovation in financial products, derivatives, complex securities, all aimed at managing and redistributing the immense risks inherent in a system built on abstract fiat currency. The complexity itself often serves as a softening filter, obscuring the underlying value until periods of financial stress reveal the structure. This phase of global capital flow and digital abstraction sets the stage for the final challenge, the ultimate decentralization promised by the crypto asset world. Chapter 20. Legacy. The long echoes of abstract value. We arrive at the final chapter of our long, slow journey through the history of value. The legacy of the centuries following the final break from gold and the rise of digital finance is the complete abstraction of money and the enduring complex nature of trust. The most profound legacy of the modern era is the triumph of fiat currency, the idea that money's value is derived entirely from the promise of the state. This principle, resurrected from the ancient Chinese early journeys, has become the universal norm. This system demands constant vigilance and communication from central banks, whose actions and pronouncements are tracked globally with intense quiet attention. The value of every dollar, euro, or yen is measured not by the gleam of gold, but by the perceived competence and stability of the issuing government, a vast, abstract system of managed expectation. The long 3,000-year history of metallism leaves behind two critical final soft reflections: gold's enduring psychological legacy. Despite its official removal from the monetary system, gold retains its power as the ultimate universal private store of value. It serves as a gentle metaphor for political neutrality and financial stability, a remnant of the ancient roots of money. Central banks and individual investors continue to hold it as an insurance policy against the systemic stress inherent in the fiat system. The new metallic standard, crypto. The rise of crypto assets is the most recent manifestation of the ancient desire for a trustless, scarce anchor. These digital assets are effectively a calm reinterpretation of the gold standard, replacing the physical quiet stone with immutable, predictable mathematical code. This duality, the regulated centralized fiat system, alongside the decentralized code-anchored digital system, is the ultimate legacy of the historical tension between government control and individual freedom. The legacy of currency is not merely economic, it is sociological. Money is the ultimate social contract, the quiet, pervasive tool that enables complex human cooperation. It is a shared story we agree to believe, allowing the immense slow tides of commerce to flow across continents. The continuous warm breath of financial innovation, from the bill of exchange to the blockchain, ensures that the human drive for efficient exchange will perpetually seek new ways to manage and simplify the problem of trust and value. The long journey of money has taken us from the simplicity of a nugget in the riverbed to the complexity of a digital ledger in the distant night. The gentle footsteps of that journey remind us that value is not inherent in the physical world, but resides entirely in the shared belief of humanity. In this quiet journey tonight, we drifted through the gentle echoes of the history of gold and currency. We moved from the quiet gleam of the origin in the riverbed and the formation of the Lydian coin, through the immense turning points of Roman debasement and the gold standard collapse, to the complete legacy of fiat and digital abstraction. We followed the slow tides of value from their earliest beginnings to the soft traces they leave behind in the foundations of our economic world. The story of money reminds us that the greatest stability is not found in the metal itself, but in the trust placed in the system, whether that system is guaranteed by a king's stamp, a central bank's promise, or the math of a computer code. It teaches us that money is fundamentally a shared belief, and belief requires continuous care. If this peaceful journey brought you ease, you may leave a soft like, or whisper in the comments where you'd like to drift next. And now, let the night grow still. Let your breath slow. May sleep come softly and carry you into peaceful rest. Good night.